Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we're going to be going through our 15 game, 7 p.m. Eastern main slate. There's a lot of games, so I've got more players than I normally put in just because of the amount of games, just so that there's a little bit more variety in players. Definitely have a lot of good pitchers, also got a lot of good pitchers to go against when it comes for batters. There's a weird thing about pitching is I really couldn't find a whole lot that was like cheap but also good. Though I do have one guy tabbed that's pretty decent, I think. But overall, you probably want to pay up for the pitchers today for the most part, and you're just going to have to pick between the top ones. So we have Carlos Rodon, Justin Verlander, Dylan Case, Tony Gonsolin, and Max Fried as our top pitchers. I passed on Corbin Burns simply because he's going against the Dodgers, even though he's a good pitcher. Dodgers tend to mess people up. Most of these guys have pretty decent upside based on who they're playing against. Maybe Gonsolin's one of the few that don't necessarily. Same with Verlander, having a little bit tougher matchups, but overall, all of these guys have high upside today. Even Corbin Burns a little bit, but again, I'm not really including him in that. The one guy that I found that was a little bit cheaper, but wasn't ideal, but is cheaper, is Corey Kluber. Just because he's going up against the LA Angels, and he has positive ability to get over 20 fantasy points. Obviously, he's better at home, as you can see, and he is going to be at home. He did have a bad game against the Angels last time they played, I believe. But yeah, minus 11. But he still has some upside. He actually got 21 against New York last game. So, he's kind of hit and miss, but, if you need to pay down for a pitcher, he's probably the best pitcher available under $8,000. The only other pitcher that's even close is Tajon Walker, but he's going against the Yankees, so I don't know if you really want to use him. Didn't. That's pretty much all I could find there. We got a whole lot of dudes that we're going to want to go against. Oakland's pitcher, Detroit's pitcher, Orioles pitcher, Washington Nationals pitcher, Fetty, Minnesota's pitcher, Colorado and Texas's pitchers, simply because they're playing in Colorado, and then Boston's pitcher, Winkowski. All of those guys are going to be guys that you might want to target in your matchups, with your main players and your stacks and stuff. So, stacking Colorado and Texas might be useful, or Toronto, Houston, Seattle, Arizona, San Francisco Giants, and also Miami. Now, I didn't include Atlanta against Pittsburgh just because he's a slightly better pitcher than average, and even though Atlanta's been really hot, I did think that there's better stacks overall. I do have a couple Atlanta players in the mix and at the different positions, but I'm not certain that an Atlanta stack is necessarily the best unless you want to just, throw Michael Harrison and Vaughn Grisham in as almost like a daily cheap options occurrence. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the catchers themselves. So my top overall catcher is from Atlanta, and that's William Contreras. If he plays, obviously, yesterday he was too, and then he didn't end up playing. But he's overall really just one of the best pitchers or catchers available, game in and game out. He almost always gets some fantasy points, and he has really good positives and stuff like that. Now, he is a little bit worse on the road than at home, but he also does hit the home runs just the same. And, there's other guys that hit, a little bit worse than him and get the home runs, but, he doesn't, he's just one of the better catchers that's available, so that's really all there is to that. Then we have three secondary options behind him, and those are Jonah Heim, who plays for Texas. Obviously, he's going to have a Colorado boost. He has home run potential, and playing in Colorado is definitely a benefit. Kirk for Toronto is also one. He's high upside catcher. He hadn't been quite as good lately, but he has had some 10-point games. It's just he's had some duds as well. And then MJ Melendez for Kansas City. He's got a bad batting average, but he does a tendency to hit home runs, and I sort of felt like he's due, despite the fact he's been kind of lackluster the last few games. Obviously, he's not the best catcher by any stretch, but he can also play outfield if you need if you need him there. But he's a pretty good option. But I still think he's probably the fourth best of those four. Probably Contreras, then Kirk, then Heim, then Melendez. As for some cheap Hail Mary choices, we have Bethancourt, who actually just hit a home run yesterday. Actually, he's hit a home run 2 games in a row, and maybe he can hit a third one against bad Angels pitching. He hasn't been particularly great against Angels, but he has been good the last 10 games, 6.1, which is better than his average. And you can see he gets a lot of 5-point games. But, if you can hit a home run, then that solves everything for you. The other guy is Shea Lingerlays for the Oakland. He is going up against Lopez, but Lopez has not been good lately. And so he definitely has some upside. He's a really strange character because he hits the ball really well, but he also strikes out a lot. So, you're going to get, maybe 2 strikeouts a game almost. But you also have that chance of a home run or even a triple and stuff like that, because he's only, hit in a few games, but he's batting .273, he's got a home run. So he's got, high upside, but very low floor as well, just because of the, strikeouts. So yeah, you've got a couple Hail Mary options, cheap options if you need them. Obviously, with the pitchers probably going to be paying up for, you're going to have to look for some decently cheap options at different positions, and so there's a couple that you could run with. Excuse me. At first base, we have, let's see, 4 top tier options, and the first one is Nate Lowe. He has been, oops, messed that. My thing is freaking out. Okay. Nate Lowe against Colorado. He's, hitting the ball pretty well. He had an 0-4 game yesterday, but he's just been hitting the ball so well as of late. It's hard to really push off of him. And the few times when I really liked him, he's actually come through just about every time. As you can see, he's got 2 home runs the last 10 games, and he's in Colorado, so that's a nice plus matchup for him. The next is Rhys Hoskins. He's been kind of hit or miss lately, but he always has home run potential. He's got a good matchup and a bad pitcher he's gone up against, and so he's a decent option. Jose Abreu for the White Sox is really starting to get going. He's got a great batting average, and he's been 8.3 for the last 10 games, and as you can see, he's getting it done with home runs and without, so he's definitely a good option. He might be my favorite option outside of Nate Lowe. And then the fourth one is Ty France for Seattle. Anytime a guy's in a little bit of a slump, going up against Washington and Fedde, I like going up against that guy. Even if a guy's in a slump like Ty France is kind of in one, this is a good place to break out of it. So that's pretty much the top 4 guys. Then I have one secondary option who's a little bit cheaper, which is Vogelback, excuse me. He's been hitting the ball pretty well as of late, right at above his average, and I think he just hit a home run yesterday, in fact, and I liked him yesterday too. So he's had 3 games, last 5, over 10 fantasy points, and so, he's not going to hit a home run every day, obviously, but he's got a pretty good game for it. And he's going up against Montas, which is a pretty decent pitcher, but I still think he's a pretty solid option. Then I have 2 expensive alternatives, and one of them is Matt Olson, and the other is Christian Walker. Both these guys have some upside, due to matchups, and you couldn't go wrong with either one probably. But I definitely like some of the other guys a little bit better, like Abreu and Nate Lowe. But if you do want to pay up for some, then you have those guys as an option. And then, of course, we have our final big, massive Hail Mary option, Albert Pujols, who just has been on a tear in the home run aspect of the game, which is quite bizarre. He doesn't necessarily have the best matchup or anything today, but he has a decent one, and if he plays, I mean, you just look at the home runs. He's hit 4 in the last 5 games, and I think 7 in the last 7 games, I guess, or 6 in the last 7 games. So, you know, if he gets a couple home runs or even one, then you're going to be happy you used him. It seems like it's almost happening every other game, so maybe this is the fade game. But, you know, this is, this is Albert Pujols, so he's chasing to get to 700 home runs. So hopefully he can get there, and hopefully if you use him, he'll come through for you. So we'll go ahead and get into second base. Second base didn't have quite as many guys that I really liked, but I had 3 top tier options. Those are Wilmer Flores, Gene Segura, and then Marcus Semien. I don't often like Marcus Semien that much, but again, he's at Texas going up against Colorado. He does have a bit of a lower batting average, and he actually does better on the road in general. And he hadn't been hitting the ball quite as good as you'd like, but again, going against Colorado, that's a plus matchup. As for Segura, you know, he's always a pretty solid play. I don't always like him, but he's usually pretty solid. He's got a pretty good matchup. He's not a big home run hitter necessarily, but he does hit them occasionally. But he does get the ball in play and gets a lot of hits, so he's a pretty decent option. But Flores is definitely my my favorite of those guys, just because of his upside and things like that. He does have more home runs. He does have the greatest batting average, but he's above average, and he always seems to come through with some points, one way or the other. And then for a secondary option, Whit Merrifield, who can also play outfield, is an option with Toronto. He doesn't always hit a whole lot of home runs, but he's been scoring the ball pretty well this season. Though he is a little bit in a slump, but again, he's got a situation where he has a pitcher he's up against. He just hit a home run yesterday, so hopefully that will continue. Or not yesterday, but a couple of days ago. And hopefully that'll help him break out of the slump he was in. And then I have another high-priced upside guy in Brendan Rodgers. Obviously, for Colorado, he's got home run potential. He's almost got 4 fantasy points better per game in Colorado than out. And as you can see, 10 of his 11 home runs are in Colorado. So, and he's got a good matchup when it comes to the pitcher. So, he might be somebody you want to go after today if you can afford him. And of course, the Hail Mary, we can't leave out Mr. Von Grissom. He has just been absolutely crushing the ball, getting points one way or the other. Yeah, he got 5 points yesterday, but if you paired him with Michael Harris yesterday, you would have been fine. He brought him home during the game, and that's how he got his 5 points in a low-scoring game with the home run that Michael Harris hit. He's been batting .391. He's got 3 home runs. You know, not a ton of games, obviously, but man, he's got some upside. So I tend to like him. Obviously, he's kind of a Hail Mary just because of his very young, and sometimes that's not always ideal for consistency. But if you need to pay down at that position, then that's a guy you can, and you can probably feel more confident than a lot of other, $200, $300 players. Then let's go ahead and move to third base. I've got 2 top tier options here, and you're going to notice Wilmer Flores again. So if you liked somebody else at second base, you can always move Flores here if you don't like anybody else at third base. The other guy is Ryan McMahon. He's been really solid, and he's better at home, obviously, than away, just like most Colorado players are. And so he's got some upside today as well. And then if we're going to go beyond that, I got 2 secondary options in Alec Boom and Yandy Diaz. Alec Boom is probably a little bit more popular for today than Diaz, just because he's been hitting the ball very well lately, and probably a little bit better, in fact, than you'd expect. He's averaging 8.1 fantasy points a game. He's got a couple home runs the last few games, and so he's got some upside. He's actually, he's got 40-point upside, in fact, and he's done that a couple times this season. So, obviously, he's a little bit more risky, but, he's about the same price as Flores and McMahon. So if you really want to, put Flores in at second, you could put him at third, or you could, switch Flores in for third and then put, Simeon or Grisham at second. Then, just to have a couple other options, Austin Riley is my expensive pick of the day from third base. And then, if you need another guy that's cheap to help you fill out the lineup with all the pitchers, I've got Brendan Donovan again for St. Louis. He's going to be your best bet at $3,200. He's not going to hit a lot of home runs, but as you can see, he can score fantasy points. He's been hitting the ball pretty well lately. His last 10 games is pretty low, but he's really just started to come on the last few games. So he can definitely score you some points at third base. Like I said, it's a little bit of a weak position, and there's not a whole lot of cheap guys. So if you really need a cheap option, then Brendan Donovan is it. However, I would say to pay low at second base and then pay up more at third. As for a shortstop, we have only 5 players that I could really find that I liked at all. Granted, they are nicely expensive with the exception of one. So let me get into those. So we have Corey Seager, Dansby Swanson, and Xander Bogaerts are my top 3 options. Now, obviously, all 3 of these guys are fairly expensive plays. Corey Seager has the Colorado boost, and he's a good home run hitter, so he can definitely take advantage of that. And same with Dansby Swanson. He's been playing pretty well as of late, and he can bash home runs as well. He's really good against Pittsburgh too, so at least he has been for most of the season. And then Xander Bogaerts, he's probably my third favorite of those 3. But he's been, he's got some upside as well to him, just with his batting average and stuff like that. And he got a home run I think 2 days ago, so hopefully he can build on that. My cheap option, secondary option actually, but also cheap, is Brandon Crawford. Crawford, there you are. He's just underpriced for the production that he puts out. He's been 7.7 points for the last 10 games, and he just hits the ball pretty well. And he actually does better away just because of the fact that San Francisco is a hard place to hit the ball. But I always feel pretty confident with him, even if he gets 5 or 7 points, you still can't be too angry just because his price is so cheap. And then finally, the other guy that I like at the shortstop position is Jose Iglesias. Now, obviously, he doesn't hit home runs, and his gap between home and away games is almost identical, just because he doesn't hit home runs really, but he does put the ball in play a lot. And so his batting average is worse at Colorado, but overall, he's a pretty solid option, and he's a good alternative to some of the more expensive guys at shortstop. Finally, at outfielder, I have 7 top tier players, and I'm just going to kind of go through them, and I probably won't show you them as much on the screen. So I have Andrew Benintendi at $3,800. He's definitely one of my top players, except for the fact he's not a big home run hitter, but he does get a lot of good hits for the Yankees. Charlie Blackmon obviously has huge upside in Colorado. He is, however, pretty expensive at $4,800. Mitch Haniger, I actually liked him quite a bit just because he went against Fedde, and he can definitely get you some points. Nick Castellanos for Philadelphia at $4,100. He's been mashing the ball of late. I actually show you him here. Nick Castellanos. He's been he's got good option here, and he's been averaging 9.5 per game. He hit a home run yesterday, and he's had a few games where he's gotten 20, 25 points. So he's definitely a good option. And then Michael Harris. I mean, what else can I say about this dude? He's just been crushing the ball since he came to the league. He's batting 286. He hit another home run yesterday. He's got 10.2 points on the road, and he's averaging 9 per game for the last 10. I don't think he's really had a terrible game with the exception of 1 or 2 maybe in those 10 games. So he's just been really consistent. And he also seems to get hits when Braves need him the most, and that's pretty interesting. And then my last two at top tier options are Kyle Tucker and Aldis Garcia. Tucker by Houston and Garcia by Texas. Obviously, Garcia has a Colorado boost as well, which is nice. But man, Kyle Tucker has been killing the ball. I don't know why I said Tucker Carlson. That's kind of funny. Anyway, he's been really killing the ball. And so I definitely recommend that guy. As for some secondary options, a little bit less expensive, Eloy Jimenez from Chicago White Sox. He's not really a home run hitter, but he's been hitting the ball well. Alex Verdugo from Boston, he kind of fits in the same category. Nelson Cruz, he's a little bit cheaper. He's been really hitting the ball well as late. And then Jock Peterson, he's a little bit more expensive, but he's a decent play with a plus matchup with the pitching perspective. And then I have a couple cheap alts. Harold Ramirez, he's been hitting the ball well. And then Jesse Winkler, he's a little more expensive at $4,000, but he's been hitting the ball okay. And he's also going up against Betty, who I like to go up against. And then for my just cheap Hail Mary plays, I actually have 3. Lars Nootbaar, he has some upside, and he's got 20-plus point games lately. Same with Jake Fraley. He's, he might get 20, but he also might just get 0. So he's got upside, but he does lack in consistency. And then Leody Taveras for the Texas Rangers. He does have the Colorado bonus, so he's not a big home run hitter, but he does have a good matchup and upside. So, obviously those last 3 guys are Hail Marys, but they can get you points in a pinch sometimes. If you need to pay down and you want to pay down the outfielder, maybe throwing one of those 3 in there. I do think there's plenty of value available and in your stacks and stuff as well that you can mix around. I feel like the slate's going to be really solid. Granted, there's a lot of games, so that helps. But overall, there's a lot of good pitchers, a lot of good batters, and so you should be able to score quite a few points today. So that's pretty much what I have for you. Thanks for liking, commenting, subscribing. Have a nice day, guys.